Nowhere to turn, no place to hide this time. No words to say, no prayer, no verse and no rhyme. Nowhere to turn that I haven't left behind. I wanna be alone, a place no one can find. Everywhere I look I see shadows stare back at me. I know I'm never gonna be the same. Never gonna be the same. Nowhere to pin the battles that I won. Nowhere to kneel, repent the sins that I've done. Nowhere to send the ghost that lives in my mind. Nowhere to search for clues that I can't find. Everywhere I look I see shadows stare back at me. I know I'm never gonna be the same. Never gonna be the same. Deep behind a restless mind, I paid the price. Nothing's free. The path ahead with memory flare. Eyes are open, but I can't see. Nowhere to turn, I can't leave a trace. Don't recognize my own eyes on my face. Nowhere to turn, I can't breathe in this place. Nowhere to run, I can't lose this race. Everywhere I look I see shadows stare back at me. I know never gonna be the same. Never gonna be the same. Everywhere I look I see shadows stare back at me. I know I'm never gonna be the same. Never gonna be the same. and the twilight lies gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fights. Oh, the red marks we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets trembling, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star spangled banner yet wave for the land under the free and the home of the brave. Yes, we are the brave. We'll fight here in the name of the brave. We are the US of A. For those unaware, that flag is still there. It's our future to save. Stand of the brave, the US of A. Oh, say, does that star spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the
They teach you a lot in the service. They teach you how to stand straight and fire your rifle. They teach you respect and survival. They teach you how to take a life and how to give your own. What they don't teach you is what happens when you come home. There are over 2 million people in the U.S. Armed Forces. For some, coming home is the hardest part. As a veteran, you are not alone. Reach out. For more information, visit us on the web at descendantsofsparta.com.
Trail of the 3rd Army and the 19th Tactical Air Command of the 8th Air Force is marked by more than 40,000 white crosses, 40,000 dead Americans.
We were young and soldiers called to dedicate our lives in the name of God and country. do what's just, boys. Go do what's right. A hot band of brothers waiting on our chance to add one more page unto the victory dance. Here am I, Lord, send me, send me.
Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send? And who will go for us? And I said, here am I. Send me.
This is Michael Broderick, Marine Corps veteran, actor, and Gallant Few board member. You are listening to the New American Veteran on Vets on Media. Now here's Carl Munger.
Michael, thank you. Good afternoon. Today is November the 18th, 2014, and welcome to the New American Veteran. The New American Veteran is a broadcast of Gallant Few Inc., a 501c3 nonprofit. Our mission is to prevent veteran isolation by connecting new veterans with hometown veteran mentors, thereby facilitating a peaceful and successful transition from military service to a civilian life filled with hope and purpose. Our goal is to connect every new veteran with a hometown veteran mentor. And we do this by creating and supporting a nationwide network of successfully transition veterans, new veterans with the same military background now going through their own transition. We believe this will prevent veteran unemployment, homelessness, and suicide. Sitting in the studio with me today, I don't very often get to do a live in-person video. Usually it's through Google Hangout on video, but I've got Dr. Carrie Elk with me. So I'm very pleased that she is able to join us here in town doing some of the Lord's work, I guess you could say. And we're going to talk about some of the work that she does. And I'd like to have a process where people can send in some questions, but we're not set up to do that yet. So I'm going to make up the questions that people would send in, and we'll see how well she does when I try and stump her a little bit. Now, first off, there's two serious announcements that I want to make. The first one is we want to dedicate this show to two soldiers that died this last week. One is Sergeant First Class Michael A. Cathcart, who was a Special Forces soldier. He died of wounds on the 14th of November from small arms fire during dismounted combat operations in Kunar Province in Afghanistan. He was assigned to the 3rd Battalion, 3rd Special Forces Group at Fort Bragg. The second one is Ranger Peter Kessig, and Ranger Kessig is a veteran of the 1st Ranger Battalion. He is in the news right now because everybody's seen him because he's the guy that the terrorists killed just a couple of days ago. Actually, it might have been a week or so, but they just released a video. And one of the hardest things to do is to really face evil. And he did that. He did it as a volunteer. He stepped out there and he said, I see this problem in the world. I have some skills that can solve it. And so he went, I talk about the power of one all the time. He took the power of one and he went over there to try and make a difference himself. And once he got over there about a year ago in October, he was kidnapped by these terrorists, and they have talked about him and allowed him to communicate by video and by written correspondence back with his family. And when you Google his name, you can find all of that stuff online. But I forced myself to watch the video that the terrorists released, and it's making the rounds in the Ranger Network. And I don't like to do that very often because when you see images like that, they stay with you for quite a while, even if they're on video. And before they showed him dead, because they didn't show the terrorist killing him, they showed a good probably 30 or 40 Iraqis that they escorted in. Each one of them had a terrorist behind them, and they slaughtered all 40 of them. They put them down on the ground and they cut all their heads off. And it's important to know that that's what's going on, because that evil exists in the world. And there are people like the men and women we're going to talk about today that go out, go face to face, eyeball to eyeball with that evil, and they stand between us and that evil. And I talk a lot about those. And because it's a quote from an old poet, I'll leave it original and not add women into it. But he said, We sleep safe in our beds at night because rough men stand ready to visit violence on those who would do us harm. And those men and women that stand between us and the terrorists, they truly stand between us and the terrorists. Social media today, I think Boone Cutler had actually posed a question because someone had written something on a social media, or maybe it was an editorial, about the fact that the last war that was truly fought for freedom, for real, was World War II. And everything since then has been for oil or money or politics or whatever. And I will tell you that the battle that we have going on right now against those terrorists is exactly the war for freedom, because if those terrorists were in our communities, you would not have your freedom. You probably would not have your lives. So you've got to, every day, you've got to thank those men and women that stand between you and that threat. And Peter Kassig, you know, every other video that they've done with one of these hostages, the hostage has made a confession on tape, and they've talked about the evils of the United States and all of that. Well, with Ranger Kassig, they didn't do that. They did not show them killing him. They just showed his head laying there on the ground in front of the coward that wears the black mask over his head. And that tells me a couple of things. Number one, Ranger Kassig didn't violate the Ranger Creed. And he did not betray his country. He stood for what he believed in, and he probably fought like hell when they decided to kill him. So they couldn't show any of that on screen because that would, you know, not be a good thing for their cause, to show somebody that was fighting back like that and not just being meek, subservient. So it's an important thing to understand. And when we get to the end of the broadcast today, before I play taps to close the show, I'm going to play the Ranger Creed. And pay close attention to it, because I believe that Ranger Kassig led that life. He led that life when he was on active duty. He earned his way into the Ranger Regiment, and that is not an easy thing. It's a lot harder to get into it now than it was 20 years ago when I was in it. And he stayed there, and he did at least one, if not two, combat deployments with them before he was discharged with a medical discharge. And then he went and threw himself right back into that fight, only this time serving and helping instead of going in and destroying things. So all respect to Peter Kassig. May God be with you and with your family. And there isn't a whole lot else that I can say other than that this show is dedicated to him and to Sergeant First Class Michael Cathcart. Okay, I do want to make another quick administrative announcement. Ranger Rendezvous, the dates just came out, August 10th to 13th, 2005. Regimental Commander Christopher Vanek relinquishes command to Colonel Marcus Evans. So there's a whole bunch of people out there that are very grateful to Colonel Vanek for what he has done, and his wife Kim to the regiment. And there's a whole bunch of folks that are jealous as hell of Colonel Evans, because he's getting ready to take command of the most lethal fighting force on the face of the planet. And Ranger Rendezvous, if you have not been to it, you need to set your calendar and you need to go, because it's 3 days of starting with as many of the Ranger battalions that are stateside jumping into a field mass drop on Friar Drop Zone in Fort Benning. And then there are a couple of days of athletics competitions, a big barbecue, culminating in the big change of command ceremony. And it's something you don't want to miss. I'll certainly be there. All the Ranger associations will be there. And if you've been there before, you know you're going back. August 10th to 13th, so mark your calendar. Also, Run Ranger Run's getting ready to kick off. I have, as I just run my chair right off my carpet, I have my Run Ranger Run 2015 shirt on. I have my Run Ranger Run bracelet on. And if we do any more events, I'm going to run out of arm space to put bracelets on. So I have to limit the number of bracelets we hand out. But runrangerrun.com, I've got a brief video here. I'm going to jump over and I'm going to play this guy. Get to the right segment.
This is Sergeant First Class Retired Mike Schlitz, 14-year Army veteran. Thank you for listening to Gallant Fuse, the New American Veteran, on Vets on Media. Run Ranger Run is pretty simple. A Ranger, Corey Smith, was about to get out of the Army. And so he decided he was going to run from Fort Benning, Georgia, all the way home to Indianapolis, approximately 565 miles, and he was going to do it in 28 days.
Well, Corey, why are you going to run home? And he said, because I want to illustrate the difficult journey that a soldier has becoming a veteran.
We realize not everybody is the athlete that Corey Smith was when he did the 565 miles, but we realize you can do it as a team and make it an event.
Gory did any bike. So we want 10 people to do 565 miles combined total, running, walking, biking, anything that you can do that you can count distance on. You could have a grandmother walking on a treadmill in the YMCA. You could have a soldier walking patrol in Afghanistan. You could have a kid walking or riding a bike to school. And all of those miles can contribute to that one team total. Run Ranger Run is the most important single event that Gallant Few does. It has a mission of awareness. Gallant Few's mission is to veterans may face as they leave active duty.
Gallant Few understands that when veterans transition off active duty, that it is an overnight change. Our goal was to set up mentors to welcome that veteran home, both professionally and socially. And we found that if we take veterans who've already been through that process, successfully transitioned, and mentored them up with these new veterans coming off, that it's a perfect match.
If I can have 100,000 veterans across the country that are just standing by waiting to mentor a veteran as he or she leaves active duty, then when that veteran returns to that hometown, they're going to be welcomed, accepted, integrated. They're going to find jobs. They're going to have doors open. The network will be there. And a lot of the issues that we see veterans go through as they transition are going to go away.
People can get involved with Run Ranger Run by visiting gallantfew.org and going under events and looking for Run Ranger Run, and all the information on how to get signed up, how to raise awareness, to build teams or become part of a team is all right there at your fingertips.
It's a cool event. It's a fun event, and it's an easy one to participate in.
If you or someone you know is looking for a new job or career, you need to visit the pros. National Career Fairs at ncfairs.com. National Career Fairs hosts over 300 career fairs a year nationwide. The events are free and give you the perfect chance to meet some of the top employers in your area face-to-face. To find the nearest career fair to you, visit ncfairs.com. Again, that's ncfairs.com. What are you waiting for?
This is Aaron Childress with Chili Off the Grid, Dish Network, Channel 266, Tuesday nights at 8:30 p.m. Central. And you're listening to the New American Veteran on Vets on Media.
Okay, if you haven't seen Chili Off the Grid, you need to go watch that because it is a funny show. Those guys are hilarious. You can Google them on YouTube also. It's probably the easiest way to watch their show. They do little clips every once in a while. It's in there too. Marine Corps veteran, Chili is, he's an entertainer, and we sure appreciate his support. Okay, so I have some other announcements, but I'm going to wait and do those here in a little while. You've been sitting there so patiently, I thought maybe I should address you and say, welcome to the New American Veteran. I'm glad you're here.
Well, it's great to be here, Carl.
Let's move you a little closer to the mic there.
Nice to do a live show instead of over the telephone.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been doing the Google Hangout thing with guests recently, so it's a back and forth on the screen, which is good, but doing a live in-person show is much better, I think. I've moved the thing so you can see how we look while we're talking here.
Oh, great.
So tell me a little bit about your background up to the Elk Institute, and then we'll talk about that, but
Sure.
Education and kind of what got you into this field.
Okay.
What do you do?
Well, I am a psychotherapist, and I have been in the field of mental health for over 20 years. I've got a background in chemical dependency counseling, family relations, and then the past several years, I've been working in military mental health, specifically in treating PTSD, PTS. I like to call it all psychological trauma. Basically, you saw something at some point in your life and it still interferes with your functioning now. That's all we really need to know. I don't like to get hung up on who meets what criteria.
I like the psychological trauma term. Is that something that's talked about widely, or is that something that's unique to you?
It's not a specific term. It's more of a global term. It's more of an umbrella. All of that falls under there. PTS, PTSD, shell shock, whatever you want to call it. So
one of the things that, I've seen a lot of discussion about whether it's a disorder or not a disorder. When you talk about psychological trauma or emotional trauma, I've heard moral injury.
Sure.
That to me, if I go out to the gym and I lift more weight than I've ever lifted in my life, the next day I'm going to be hurt. I mean, I'm going to be sore. It might be a good hurt, but I'm going to be sore one way or the other.
Right.
So I may have to go through extra steps to stretch. I may even have to go see a therapist that can help me with range of motion or that kind of stuff. So to me, having that kind of a psychological injury is similar to straining a muscle because it's something that you don't go through all the time. You've overexerted that portion of your body. So now you have to go back in and work to make it whole again. And just me personally, maybe it's just the way I like to wrap things up in my head, but that's how I like to think about the value of having somebody like you, because you're like that physical therapist that comes in, helps you regain range of motion, only you're working with the brain and the emotions.
When you can't do it yourself, that's a very good analogy. And as you said, sometimes whenever you have, actually the majority of psychological injuries will over time correct themselves. But when they don't, and you find over time, just as with a physical injury, after you do the things that you do for yourself to rehabilitate after an injury, when you see that that's not doing it, you need a little help, then you come in and get help with your psychological injuries as well.
So when you say that a lot of those things heal themselves or correct themselves over time, is that different for every person? Might somebody have it corrected within 24 hours and somebody else might take 24 days? Or when you say doesn't correct itself over time, is there after a month, is that where you start thinking, well, maybe this is not going to correct itself. I need to go get some additional help?
Everybody's different. Like you said, everybody's different. It's almost like a grieving, for example, how long I shouldn't still feel this way. And that's kind of a subjective thing. People know. Initially, when I started looking at psychological trauma and treating it, I thought it would be an amazing thing and just the right thing to do an intervention at DMOB. But as I learned more, and you all taught me more, everything I know, I'm a civilian lady. So what I've learned and what I do is all from listening. If you listen to people long enough, and closely, they'll teach you how to help them. And that's what you all have done in the veteran community. And I thought that was a good idea. But then as I learned more and more, that's not where the problems necessarily show up.
Yeah, so you meant at DMOB, you mean like right as you return back to the United States and you're going through your out processing or turning in your gear?
Yes.
Also go through somewhere where you get to talk to somebody.
I thought, well, the procedure I do, which I'll explain in a little bit, is a very short acting one traumatic event per intervention, and it's finished with. And I thought, well, why don't we just do that before people go home and even have a problem? Let's cut it off before it starts. But the problem with that is, what I learned is that's not when the problems surface. It's 60 days, 90 days later when you see it's not reintegration anymore. It's not adapting. It's not reintegrating. It's staying.
So is that something that's related to the excitement of coming home and all of the things? You have all these activities piled up with meeting your loved ones.
I'm fine, I'm home. It's all good now.
Yeah.
Until you try to do that. And for a while, there are going to be disruptions. There's going to be adjustment, obviously. But when you see that those things don't settle down and they don't kind of come back into a norm for yourself, and you're still having nightmares, still having trouble sleeping, exaggerated startle response, things like that, ragey anger, whatever it is, or even numbness. That's another one. We all talk about the quintessential PTSD symptoms and all of that, which are the positive symptoms. Basically, when I say positive, I don't mean it's a positive experience. I mean that they're things that were added to your behavior. Things that are added that are a problem, as opposed to the negative symptoms, the ones that are things are taken away from you, like numbness is one of the symptoms that a lot of people don't recognize are a sign of psychological trauma. Whether that be emotional numbness, everybody in the room is having an emotional response to something and you feel nothing. And you're looking around going, I should probably be feeling something, and I don't. What about the other side of it? Every time a TV show comes on, it's got puppies on it, makes you feel like you want to cry. Is that a symptom too? I don't think so. I don't know what that is.
When the last year that I was on active duty, we had a helicopter crash that killed 12 out of 13 on board, and several of them I was very close to, very good friends with. And I can't even describe what it felt like the following days, like the following 2 weeks. It was like walking around, constantly being kicked in the stomach, and just this feeling was just almost to the point where you just want to sit down and not do anything. But you had to, because we're still in the active duty unit. We still had a mission. We still had to go do things. So that's the closest that I can relate to the kind of combat trauma that a lot of people feel, because I have never been shot at. I've seen a lot of things, but I've never been shot at. But that loss, the experience of that loss was so profound. 20 years later, we had in 2012, we had a reunion at the crash site in Utah. And some of the families came. I'm going to choke up just talking about this. Some of the families
We
came
can fix that.
that I had never that I'd never met. One of them was a daughter, a little girl who was 2 years old when the crash happened. So now she's 22. And she came walking into the room, and there are some Air Force veterans there and some Army veterans, and there are some parents and some other siblings that are there. And she walks in and she announces her dad's name and says, "Does anybody here know him?" And one of the guys turns around and said, "He was my best friend." And so they, and yeah, that was the immediate reaction, was everybody was and she immediately burst into tears. He burst into tears. They're hugging each other. And then she pulls out some pictures and she's starting to show them. And she says, "I really wish there were more pictures that, you know, I had of my dad, but I just don't have very many pictures." And then she said, "There was one picture though I didn't bring with me, but he looked really, really happy." And she described the surroundings. And she said, "I've always wondered what was going on when that picture was taken." And the other guy went, "Oh, we were in a strip club." So then everybody had a real good laugh. But the next day, as we went out on the actual anniversary of the event, very, very moving, very emotional to be there. It was the first time that I had gone to the crash site since the night that it had happened. And that's something that has stayed with me, you know, more than the last 20 years.
And so when something like that happens, having a sad or a bad memory is appropriate. Being sad about something that happened is appropriate. You don't want to not feel, but it doesn't have to elicit the traumatic response. It doesn't have to elicit a response that you can't go where you want to go, that you can't be around people or things that you want to be around because of it. So there's a difference. There's no way to make a bad or a sad event, a traumatic event, good. If a therapist tells you, "Oh, when you imagine that, Carl, instead take yourself to your happy place, you know, a day on the beach," yeah, just walk out of the office. That is so disrespectful to the situation and what you've been through. And it's not authentic. That's crazy.
Let's talk about, since you mentioned that, let's talk about a lot of the current methodologies for addressing post-traumatic stress. If you go to the traditional VA facility and you say, "I think I have PTSD," or "I'm not sleeping," or "I'm whatever," they put you into a program called Immersion Therapy. I think most of them do Immersion Therapy. Can you explain what Immersion Therapy is? And I'll ping off of you as you talk about that.
You know what you're doing when you ask me that question.
Well,
it's called prolonged exposure therapy.
Sure.
And
so you can just explain what it is, and then I will make comments about what I perceive when I work with veterans that go through that. How's that sound? That way I won't put you on the hook for anything.
I don't mind anymore. I used to try to be polite to my colleagues that do that kind of therapy, but out of respect for the veterans and service members that I encounter that are trying to go through that, I decided that I just need to, you guys rely on me to speak the straight truth as a mental health professional to your community, and I will do that whether people like it or not. It's the truth. The prolonged exposure therapy is very grueling because of the brain science of PTSD and psychological trauma. Whenever you put somebody in the context of their threat, you clench your body. You guys call it the PF, you know? And so you clench your body and you're...
She means pucker factor, by the way.
Yeah. You guys taught me that too, so that's what that is. So I called it clenching. But anyways, whenever that happens to begin with, when you're experiencing your original traumatic event, the first thing that happens in your body, the first part of your human body to respond to a threat is the lower, the pelvic floor muscles, the gluteus muscles, the sphincter muscles, all of that clench automatically. And it sends an impulse to your brain, danger, danger, your life is in danger, go into survival mode, life-sustaining mode. And that's when you start operating off of your back brain or your old brain.
The primitive part.
Primitive part. Your sympathetic dominance is where you are in your sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. Your neocortex, your higher order thinking, where there's language and reasoning and problem solving and all the higher order stuff that makes us human, is really constricted, if not completely inaccessible to you during that traumatic event. So you're operating off of your old brain.
So you don't need to know how to do 9 times 9 when you're in that situation. No. You just worry about surviving.
That's right. And also, recently this has come up, so I thought I would mention it. Sometimes you're missing pieces of a traumatic event. You don't really remember who was where or how much time went by. because that's the part of your brain, the human part of your brain that catalogs everything, all those details. You cannot be bothered with all of those little details when you're in life-sustaining mode. You're taking care of business. All those little things, the smell, sights, and sounds going on around you that aren't pertinent to survival are not, you're not attending to them. And that's okay. And that's essential during that time. But later on, those things become your trigger. So anyway, back to what I was saying, both parts of brains have their own memory system. So the one that's out to lunch when you're in survival mode is the part that catalogs everything. The back brain or old brain that you're operating on during the traumatic event only has sensory memory. So the smells, sights, and sounds going on around you that you're not processing are only attached to that sensory, that physiological arousal. That's why you have triggers later.
So an example I think that most people may have gone through is if you've ever been in a car wreck where the radiator has been ruptured, the smell of that antifreeze. For me, we were in a bad car wreck when I was young. One of my sisters hit her head pretty hard, and we were very concerned about all that. But I remember it because there was a telephone pole involved in the front of the car, and antifreeze is everywhere. So now anytime that I smell antifreeze, it's like car wreck. It immediately makes me think of that. Same kind of thing.
Exactly. Because during that car accident, you were clenching and bracing yourself, and that detail of that smell was necessary. No question about that. It's offered. The thought is to decrease the distress about the traumatic event by continuously exposing you to elements of that trauma. But given what I just told you, how you get PTSD to begin with, imagine you go to the therapist's office and they're putting your trauma, you're going to clench and you're going to stay there. The part of your brain that's going to do new thinking, new problem solving and all that is not going to be present. You're going to be essentially surviving your therapy sessions. They continuously expose you to the things that trigger you and hold you there till you can stand it. So what ends up happening is,
that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Well, you do it is what it is. You're in the context.
It's like somebody telling you knock jokes to the knock jokes to the point where you're like, they're not even funny anymore. It doesn't affect you anymore. It doesn't affect you anymore. However, that still hasn't reprocessed the traumatically stored memory. So, it's first of all, people won't sign up for that a lot of the time. If you told me that that's what I had to do, I was going to go to an office with a stranger, usually a civilian, who's going to put me in the context of my trauma over and over and over and over again. And it's going to be a different stranger every time you go back.
Potentially, because you almost can't speak to that.
But that's the complaint that I hear from a lot of veterans is when they go back, they expect to kind of pick up where they left off, and now it's a new person who wants to go all through the whole thing. And most of the veterans that drop out of that program do it at the second or third session because it is now they're not sleeping, and now they're kicking the dog, and now they're
you're going to exacerbate symptoms, right? So if you have this trauma, you really don't want to deal with the fact that it's bothering you anyway. You kind of want it to just stay back there.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in a minute.
So then you finally say, okay, I've got to get some help. You walk in and they decide that you're going to be exposed over and over to your traumatic triggers. Well, then you are more agitated. Then you are more anxious. Then you are more angry. So maybe 2, 3, 4 sessions in, their symptoms are worse. And people say, I've gotten worse, not better. I'm done. We have a veteran that has dropped out of treatment against medical advice, didn't complete treatment.
And doesn't have any tools.
Well, I'm just thinking of, we're talking about now we're calling him or her non-compliant.
Right.
Well, hold on a minute. You're setting somebody up.
Right.
It's very hard.
And you might even lose your benefits because
that's right. And it's not their fault. It makes it worse. You know, it really does. I know that I had one of my clients before he came to me. He said, I went to me, and one of his triggers was explosions of any kind. And he had little kids. And he said, fireworks. He said, going to Disney, I turn into an ogre as the evening goes on, because I know we got to get out of there before the fireworks come on. So he went to the VA and he said, well, he didn't say that, doctor. He called him something else. Leave it to your imagination. Said,
called him Mickey Mouse, didn't he? Because of Disney.
that would have been a compliment compared to what he called him. But rightfully so. He said, what your therapy is going to be when you come in here is I'm going to play recordings of explosions until you can get used to that. And he told his mother, who was the person that helped him out, that supported the veteran, because he was single, her job was to set off firecrackers around the house when he wasn't expecting it so that he could become used to it. And I said, did you do it? He said, we left and, said, forget it. And I said, good for you. I'm glad you didn't do that. And I'm sorry that that's what they said to you.
Why is it that, that seems to be so common sense, bad thing to do. Why is it that's so widely accepted and practiced? Why doesn't the community of psychotherapists say, stop the madness, let's redirect to something else?
Well, when you're part of a big system, like the therapists that work in those big systems, they can't turn that huge ship around themselves like that. But when I've spoken to a group of those therapists, of mental health professionals in that environment, and I'm talking about these things just like we are right now, going through the different therapies that are currently available and the issues with them and all of that, I get a lot of head nods. 200 VA therapists going like this. So I'm going, okay, so they know, but they,
This is a reason why Dr. Elk has just received approval for a 501c3 for the Elk Institute. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Which means donations are tax deductible. Now, I'll tell you, Gallant Few made a significant donation to the Elk Institute earlier in the year because the work that she does is so valuable and it's so pertinent and it works that we couldn't take the risk of her having to go flip hamburgers or something. I don't know what you would have done.
I would hope I'm not flipping hamburgers with a PhD and 11 years of school behind me. Jeez.
Oh yeah, I know some actors in Hollywood that are flipping hamburgers.
I would have to go back into civilian private practice and deviate from my
mission.
and then,
but what she does when she treats a veteran, she doesn't charge the veteran. If there's TRICARE involved, or if there's a way that you can bill for that, I hope that you do it because you should be compensated for any time that you can. But she doesn't charge a veteran to go do the kind of work that she does, and it's absolutely life-saving. We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to play a couple of pieces, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about what you do now, what is the kind of therapy that you do, and what kind of results are you getting from that, okay? So I should have you like dancing or something while I get my act together here. This is Ranger Chris Bemis. Ranger Bemis, he is an extra special kind of guy, but he had a couple of bad things that happened, and this is something we got to talk about when we come back to, is this fatal circle. And one of the reasons I want to play this is because I want to pull up a graphic that we can talk about while this is playing. But Chris had a DUI, got warned, don't do that, and then got a second one, only this time he wrecked his truck, and now he's paralyzed from mid-chest down. So this is a little piece that talks about what he's been through.
What do you stand to lose when you make the choice to drink and drive? Your career, the people that you love the most, your ability to walk, your ability to use your hands. The list goes on and on. What do you stand to gain when you make the choice to not drink and drive? You stand to gain everything. I made the choice to drink and drive, and that's some of the things I lost. Learn from my mistakes. Make the right choice. Don't drink and drive. Rangers lead the way.
The Spartan Pledge kind of looks like this, and then I'll give you the rundown of how it got started and how popular it's become. Not really popular, just effective. I will not take my own life by my own hand until I talk to my battle buddy first. My mission is to find a mission to help my warfighter family. That's the Spartan Pledge. It's nothing you have to memorize verbatim, but just get the gist of it. And that is, we don't kill ourselves until we talk to our battle buddy. And our mission in life is to have a mission that helps our warfighter family. About 3 years ago, when it started between two guys, myself and my battle buddy, Nacho. We were in Iraq together, and we had lost touch with each other. He called me one night when he was upset because a friend of his had committed suicide. And this guy, if I'm not mistaken, was a police officer at the time, but he was also a warfighter. He was a veteran. And that brought up the subject of suicide between us. And we realized that both of us had spent a lot of time thinking about suicide, but not talking about it. And with the suicide rate in America being what it is today with warfighters, it's something that is a definite relevant subject. Since then, I've taken that pledge with other warfighters, more than I can honestly remember. And now not too many people take that pledge with me because they've gone on to take that pledge with other guys, and it's just permeated throughout the community. Every guy I know that I took that pledge with has taken it with several other guys. It's been put on posters on Facebook and all over the place. And in my opinion, nobody owns it. We all own it. We all own a piece of it. We all have a piece of that, the Spartan pledge, because it's something that means something. Because we don't trust the doctors. We don't even trust our family members, but we trust our battle buddies. So take that pledge with your battle buddy. And remember, if someone takes that pledge with you, that means you're taking it with them. Me, I'd have to call and contact a lot of people if I was going to off myself. And I would, because I took a pledge. That's the descendants of Sparta. That's what it's all about. That's what the Spartan pledge is. If we can just do that, we don't need all the other stuff. We take care of ourselves, we take care of our own, and we maintain a mission focus. The Spartan pledge. That's where it comes from, and you decide where it goes. Contact a battle buddy. Talk to them. Find out that what you realize and what you think is reality is not necessarily reality. We all are going through the same thing in silence. You don't have to sign a paper. You don't have to make a dedication online. It's just a phone call between two guys, two warfighters, male or female. Doesn't matter. I will not take my own life by my own hand until I talk to my battle buddy first. My mission is to find a mission to help my warfighter family. All the way. Make it happen.
Hello, this is Sergeant Class Retired Mike Schlitz, 14-year Army veteran and wounded warrior. If you're a veteran who's transitioning off active duty back to his home community and needs some assistance or suggestions on how to better adapt to civilian life, please visit gallantfew.org.
All right, we're back live. Let's talk real briefly about why some special operations veterans don't seek help, and then we can get into what you're going to talk about. Let me flip over on the screen. I think I can share this. I've not showed you this before, so this is like surprise time, right? But you've heard me talk about it. You've heard me talk about it before, so it shouldn't be anything. It shouldn't be anything that is that's too outlandish. But what I see, what I went through, what I think a lot of special operations veterans go through, and I think that a lot of combat, because of the nature of the people who have volunteered and gone through all the training and have volunteered even post 9/11 to go put themselves in front of the bad guys. The first thing is they have something going on inside, whether it's physical pain, emotional pain, mental pain, but we're all trained you don't show weakness. You don't go to somebody else and you say, oh, you know, I'm depressed today, or I didn't sleep good last night, or I feel like throwing up all the time. You're expected to suck it up, drive on, accomplish your mission. So what that means, that part of that wheel, the next one is I'll get through this, because all the training that I went through, I got through that. I went through some very, very difficult times. I got through all of that. So I'll get through this too. And oh, by the way, everybody else is doing fine. When I look at, like Boone said, we're all suffering it in silence, because you look around and everybody else looks like they're doing just great, which means the logical assumption is there's something wrong with me. But if there's something wrong with me, then what's my value? What's my purpose? What am I really worth? That leads you into lost hope. But then you can't go to somebody and say, I don't have any hope anymore. I don't know what my purpose is, because you can't show weakness. Then you think you'll get through it. So you have this never-ending wheel that continues to crank. And in the middle of that, when you look at employment stress, financial stress, relationship stress, and then you throw on top of that traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress, medications, alcohol, the whole thing becomes this juggernaut that will just
Mhm.
absolutely crush you.
Mhm.
And we've got to break that cycle. We've got to go out there and we've got to tell somebody that's a 20-year veteran of the special operations community, it's normal for you to feel like that. It's normal for you to go through these kinds of feelings. It's also normal for you to try to hide it from everybody else. But in order for all of us to heal and get better, we've got to break through that. We've got to say, hey, I am a big enough person. I'm brave enough that I'm going to say, yeah, I had trouble sleeping or whatever. You have had some recent success with a long-term Navy veteran that you treated that he fits this perfectly as to, I think, why he wasn't going out and telling people about this. But then once you worked with him, he was able to break through that stuff. So this is a kind of a good segue into the treatment that you do.
Okay.
I'll put this back on live here.
Okay. So going back to what you were saying there, and this is spontaneous because I've never seen that before.
I like to challenge people.
That's all right. But I just want to ask you a question. You know, as you were talking about that, you know, this isn't working right, you know, something's not working right, but I'm not going to tell anybody and all of that. I'm going to continue because you just had to continue with the mission. And so you try to do that too outside. But I guess I would ask you because I don't know the answer to, I don't know, but if you are still in combat and a piece of your equipment isn't working properly, do you say, oh, I'm too embarrassed to tell anybody and try to complete the mission?
No, but sometimes you try to rig it together so it keeps working because you may not be able to go.
If you see that it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. If your weapon is unrepairable and you can't use it to fight, you have to tell somebody.
If it's not functioning.
Absolutely.
Right. If it's not functioning, you've got to say something.
Absolutely.
Or else you're going to be in big trouble and you're going to jeopardize a whole lot of other people that are depending on you.
Right.
So using that same analogy, whenever you are out and you realize that you've got these feelings or you're not sleeping or, you know, all of those different symptoms that psychological trauma kind of manifests itself into. It could be marital issues. It could be a whole lot of different things, alcohol issues to try to help the pain and everything like that. You know, you have your equipment as well. And it's not that something's wrong with it. Like I said before, what happens is when you're in a threatening situation like that and you're in survival mode, the memories aren't stored entirely because some of those details just cannot be dealt with at that time because you need to survive and you need to stay focused.
Oh, wait, let me take a time out so I can sit down and think about what's going on.
Can't do that.
Yeah, right.
You know, and you can't look around and label and catalog everything that's happening. You just can't do that. So essentially what's happening is the same thing. Your equipment isn't functioning properly. There's all that's over and you're safe. We can reprocess that with both parts of the brain available to you so that it doesn't cause those same symptoms. It isn't misfiring anymore or whatever it may be. And you're right. The guy that you're talking about, I know you've heard him speak before. That was 2 years ago, actually. So he's had even cumulative effect of the good results that he got immediately. But his big statement is, you know, I powered through buds, I powered through this, and, you know, you just power through things. You know, you have problems, you power through. And he said, and I've done it for so long, I was limping along for so long, powering through, and it took so much energy to do it that you don't have to do that. And he's encouraging people not to do that because it was very simply, came into my office, we took care of a traumatic event, he reprocessed it. I don't do anything to people. I'm not an expert on anybody's trauma. You know, you're an expert on your own life and your own trauma. I'm an expert on a process. I can invite you to take the next step. Here's what comes next. Here's what comes next. Then you do this, then you do this. And he was able to, in one session, get that settled down and has been sleeping each night without meds. Yeah, because you can do one traumatic event per session. Now that session, I always schedule 2 hours. And it doesn't usually take the whole 2 hours, but I don't want somebody to be rushed or me to be rushed. Once we're there dealing with it, you know, I just want to hang with that person until we're done. So then they don't have to come back and revisit it.
Can you talk about some of the mechanics of how do you address that traumatic situation? If it's not tell me all the blood and gory details. How do
And you don't have to disclose it either. That's optional. Sometimes people like to tell me what the event is because they've never told it before, and it's a safe place to say it if they'd like to. But I've also treated people who I don't even know what their traumatic event was. You know, are you at the beginning, middle, or end of watching the scene play out on your mind's eye? And we just go from there. You know, sometimes they don't even know. I don't even know what they're dealing with. But essentially, there are two things that happen during it's brief imaginal exposure therapy is the category of therapy. I don't subscribe to any particular brand. There are a lot of commercialized brands. People call it something and they label it and sell it and all that. But they're all brief imaginal exposure therapies. Two things happen during that time. First of all, you're able to consider your traumatic event with a relaxed body, which some people can't imagine happening, telling the story of the trauma that happened without getting a knot in your stomach and tightness in your chest or tearing up or choking up or whatever it might be. But the first part is to separate the traumatic material from the physiological response. So then once you can remain soft-bodied, and remember that means your thinking brain is back on, to remain in a non-anxious presence in the context of your threat is the first thing. So that's the first. The second part is you have to have closure with dignity. And I don't know what somebody's closure is, and they don't know what their closure is. If they did, they would have done it by now. But through the process of the therapy that I do, those are the two kind of things that happen. So basically, you're able to remain calm in the context of that traumatic material. And the second part is you've gone through that whole memory, filled in the pieces. I just did therapy this morning with somebody out here in Texas, and there were a lot of things that he didn't remember about his trauma. But through the 1 hour and 15 minutes I was with him, he remembered who was there. He remembered a lot of different things that he didn't remember before. And that gives you closure, because now you are in charge of the material. It's not this elusive what happened. It's your memory, and you've got the whole story, and you can remain calm when considering it. Still bad or sad. I'm not saying that you don't have sad feelings. I'm saying you're not ready to throw up, or you don't want to cut it off and go the other way and stop talking about it or whatever it might be, or get enraged or something. So those are the two things that happen.
When I try to do a very simplistic description of that, when I'm talking with somebody, I say, this is why this works so well. My description, we got about 5 minutes and then I'll have to do the wrap up.
Sure.
I tell somebody that when you're in that traumatic experience, your brain is recording everything in HD, but it's storing it in that primitive part of your brain where it kind of gets locked in there. Yeah. And that's why when the smell, the sight, the sound makes that memory come back in and kind of take over. But when you do your therapy with them, you help move the memory from that primitive part of the brain into a different file system. It's like taking a file on your computer from your A drive and putting it on your C drive.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there's been something that several clients have told me, veterans have told me in the past 2 weeks that's helpful. Can you hand me that manila folder over there really quick? They told me that when I explain it, that this was the one that they were like, you know what really helped me was this. Okay, so just say this is your memory of today, barring that you didn't have any trauma today. This is a regular day in your life, okay? And so it's kind of like this. You can take out, is today the 17th, whatever it is?
18th.
November 18th. And you can take it out and say, yeah, I did that, and I had that for breakfast, and that happened. Okay, and it goes in the file drawer of your life, right? And that's fine. And when you want to think about it, you bring it out, think about it, and not, okay, but it doesn't jump up. When you're going through a traumatic memory, because part of your brain is not storing it neatly and labeling it, this is what your traumatic event looks like in the file drawer of your life, kind of like this. So every single day when you pull out the file drawer of life, it bangs up against everything because it's not filed properly, because it was only processed by half of your brain. It's still memory, it still exists. You know that this happened, but it doesn't fit anywhere exactly. So we do the therapy, you take it out, you go through every piece, I hang with you until it's complete. I don't tell you to hurry up. We don't have to put it under lock and key because it's so upsetting. We're non-anxious presence, looking at it, it gets stored away. Whenever you say it's done, we're done. It becomes an archive in your history. It's very important. You want to remember what happened because it'd be disrespectful not to. But it goes in the file drawer. And when you want to think about it, you can bring it out. But when you don't want to, it stays there because we've filed it, we've integrated, everything's integrated and it's complete now, as opposed to a fragmented memory jumping up whenever there's an element of it. Yeah, so hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy. Talk real quick about dual diagnosis. What is that and why is that so important?
Okay, Dual diagnosis is when you've got mental health issues and substance abuse issues, which we see a lot of. And in fact, when I was working in mental health in an inpatient hospital, whenever I was just with my master's degree, I saw all of the issues with that. There were mental health disorders that were, people were self-medicating and whatnot. I just saw that they went together. So I actually went back and got one of the first degrees in dual diagnosis at Penn State because I knew I was going to need both. You treat substance abuse one way, you treat pure mental health the other way, but dual diagnosis you treat simultaneously. If you take alcohol away from somebody that's self-medicating for an anxiety disorder, you take their alcohol away, they are not going to be able to partake in any therapy. They're going to be so anxious that they're not going to be able to handle it. Conversely, if they've got the alcohol, you can't do therapy or any learning or teaching with somebody who's under the influence.
Right.
So you have to treat them simultaneously, kind of like the clutch and the gas, you know what I mean? Letting out on one until you kind of get where you're going. Some programs will say they're dual diagnosis, but basically it's a mental health program that will tolerate substance abuse, or a substance abuse program that will tolerate that you have mental health problems, but they're truly not dual diagnosis. So you got to look at what they do on a daily basis, ask for their program. Are they addressing both or not?
Okay, so in closing this up, somebody out there hears this and they go, my spouse needs this, or I need this. What do you recommend they do?
Dual diagnosis treatment? PTSD treatment?
Any.
Okay, well, you can always ask me. You can email me or you can call me. And if I, at the Elk Institute for Psychological Health and Performance, if it's not what I do that you need, I will certainly help you find what it is that you need. And you can go to my website, which is www.elkinstitute.org, and you can find other contact information there.
And I'll put that in the text with the YouTube video, and then this will go out so people can download it on iTunes and listen to it when they're commuting, that kind of thing. So it'll be in the show description for that. Anything else, parting thoughts you'd like to share with everybody before we conclude?
No, just that, not anything in particular, but just know that PTSD, PTS, like trauma, whatever you'd like to call it, it does not come from mental illness. It doesn't come from brokenness, wrong action. It doesn't come from ill preparedness or not using your training. It comes from a natural physiological response to a traumatic situation. And just because you're human, that happens. You have that physiological response because you're a human being. So there's no shame in saying, hey, doc, I was taking care of business or kicking butt or whatever you want to call it, and I have an unintegrated memory. You know, help me get this together so I can continue on my mission.
One of our goals with Gallant Few is to be able to raise funds so that we can help Dr. Elk make a tour around the country and put on seminars for other mental health professionals so they can get the concept, understand what it is, and then use the existing tools they already have, because if they don't have to relearn.
Yeah, I don't do anything. It's not some newfangled way of doing things. I literally use pieces of existing therapies that are in the public domain. Any licensed therapist has the skills. They just need to be taught how to put them together.
So if you want to specifically support that work, send a donation to Gallant Few and just put Elk on the check. Put it, if you make the donation online, you go to gallantfew.org, there's a place to donate. You can click on that button. In the remarks, just put Elk, and we'll make sure and we'll fence that money aside, and we will use it to support our efforts to spread this word around mental health professionals all across the country. Because, you know, Boone's video when he talked about the Spartan Pledge and how at that time it was 18 veterans commit suicide every day. Now the VA says it's 22. I don't believe we can stop 22 suicides a day. It's impossible to take that on, but we can stop the next one. And then we can stop the next one. And if we keep attacking the next one, if we can stop the next suicide, then pretty soon we are going to make a dent, and it's going to be something that's noticeable. And it's going to take professionals all across the country to be able to do that. I started the show out talking about Ranger Kassig and his sacrifice by the terrorists this last week. And I want to conclude the show by playing a clip. The radio station in Columbus, Georgia did the Ranger Creed after 9/11, and it is an awesome presentation of the Ranger Creed. So I'm going to put that on and let y'all listen to that. And then at the conclusion of that, taps will play. And I close the show with taps every time, but it's even more fitting that we do this now because of circumstances in the world. So thanks for joining us, gallantfew.org. And you can find more videos and audio of our broadcast at vetsonmedia.com/TNAV.
Rock 103 salutes the Rangers of Fort Benning, Georgia, recognizing that I volunteered as a ranger, fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession. I will always endeavor to uphold the prestige, honor, and high esprit de corps of my Ranger regiment, acknowledging the fact that a Ranger is a more elite soldier who arrives at the cutting edge of battle by land, sea, or air. I accept the fact that as a Ranger, my country expects me to move further, faster, and fight harder than any other soldier. Never shall I fail my comrades. I will always keep myself mentally alert, physically strong, and morally straight. And I will shoulder more than my share of the task, whatever it may be. 100% and then some. Gallantly will I show the world that I am a specially selected and well-trained soldier. My courtesy to superior officers, neatness of dress, and care of equipment shall set the example for others to follow. Energetically will I meet the enemies of my country. I shall defeat them on the field of battle, for I am better trained and will fight with all my might. Surrender is not a Ranger word. I will never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy, and under no circumstances will I ever embarrass my country. Readily will I display the intestinal fortitude required to fight on to the Ranger objective and complete the mission, though I be the lone survivor. Rangers lead the way. WVRK Columbus, cleared channel worldwide. Rock 103.
That beautiful rendition of Taps is a public domain recording created by a soldier or employee of the United States Army and as such is not eligible for copyright protection in the United States. Kenny Thomas' song Send Me is used by permission of Kenny Thomas. All other work or recording is original work or used by permission. This has been a presentation of Gallant Fuse, the New American Veteran on the Vets on Media Global Network.